Thanks for joining us. We'll give it a minute or so for everyone to join into the call, and then we'll get going with the April TBC Power Hour with our esteemed guests joining us this morning, which will be some good fun to see what they have for us. Thanks for joining us, and we'll give it a minute or so before we get going. Okay, it looks like there's still a few people joining us. Let's give it another bit to see what happens to the numbers. It looks like we're starting to stabilize a little bit there. I think a minute past. Let's get going. Again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. I really appreciate your time that you set aside to join us this morning. We appreciate it. This TBC Power Hour for April will be accelerating DOT workflows with Trimble Connect. So we got the guys from Caltrans joining us, and they're just going to showcase some of the stuff they've been doing with all the Trimble products and Trimble Connect, and how they utilize it in their daily work, and how they go about integrating it into their daily stuff. With me today, my name, first of all, Albert Olivier. Hopefully you know me by now. If you haven't been on one of these, thanks for joining us for the first time. I'm the technical product manager looking after Trimble Business Center. I run these and all the training materials and so forth on the go-to-market material stuff for TBC. And with me today is Ken and Mark. Ken, would you introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, I'm Ken Sutterfield. I work for Caltrans. I am one of the district technology coordinators. So my role is to tinker, implement, and train from my perspective. So I get to work with a lot of neat people and new technologies.
Thanks. And Mark, over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Albert. My name is Mark Counts. I'm the chief of BIM for I. So that's BIM for Infrastructure Survey Systems. That means that, in a nutshell, I help better connect our people, our workflows, our data, and our outcomes.
Thanks. Appreciate it, guys. Appreciate your time. I appreciate joining us for this Power Hour and showcasing what you guys do and how you utilize Trimble products in your daily work environments. Just a quick housekeeping setup. We are just going to use the Q&A section. So if you want to ask any questions to Mark and Ken, please use the Q&A. If you don't see it on your Zoom toolbar, just click on More and you'll see there is Q&A. Please use that instead of the chat. We respond to all the Q&A questions, and that gets captured as well. So if we don't get around to all your questions, we can always reach out to you afterwards. The chat, unfortunately, when we close this webinar, the chat information gets lost. So please use the Q&A wherever you want to. We'll work through it. I think we'll try and get to the Q&A at the end and not interrupt Ken as he goes through his presentation and video. But if there's something very urgent, I'll jump in and let you know, Ken, if there's something specific that pops up. Next up is just the agenda quickly. So Ken will work through his video demonstration for you guys. We'll jump in the Q&A and then just quickly look at some resources and some information about TBC subscriptions coming up in this year that we want to show you. And with that, I'll stop sharing, and Ken, it's over to you.
Thank you.
Well, I think you can just start sharing. It will just override my share.
Okay, I'm excited to share what we've been using Trimble Connect for. So I've got a video here that kind of showcases some stuff. So most of the projects that we're going to be showing you are located in District 1, northwestern corner of California. our first location is what's referred to as the Devil's Elbow Slide. This was unfortunately one of the locations where we had a worker fatality. And part of our response to that was to scan the site immediately after. So we did that with UAS-based LiDAR. And we then chose to load that up into Trimble Connect to allow our response teams to be able to identify how stable the site was. So we were able to use the Trimble Reality Capture professional services and load that point cloud up same day for our safety officer, our executive staff, and contractor, and anyone else that needed access to be able to evaluate the site. And this let us be able to get to a response plan and then to take action on it. And so what you see here is we had to document what the length of the tree was. And obviously, after having this type of issue, we didn't want anyone on site underneath that slide to handle that. Then this later was rescanned both by our surveyors and myself as we tried to get the scope of the entire site together. And that's where we ran into some issues in that the fact that the slide mass goes roughly 800 feet up. And so we ended up needing to do some additional work to try and get this safe enough for our geotech staff to go up. So we actually hired out a helicopter logger and had that area scrubbed, pulled trees down in that area. And I had the luxury of kind of monitoring that site and showing that tree fall. So with our scan that we did, we were only able to collect to visual line of sight under part 107. So we were unable to collect the additional scarping that's about 800 to 1,000 feet up the slope, which led us to hiring out helicopter LiDAR. We were able to schedule that through Frontier and have that turned around in about a week. So that way we could get out on site and work with the temporary restoration to try and get one lane of traffic going back through here. This had the road closed for about 2 to 3 weeks while we were trying to get this safe enough for people and traffic to work underneath. And so as you can see, 1,000 feet up the hillside was as far as we could reach with our LiDAR systems. And so we ended up using a yellow scan Voyager on a helicopter. And that was how we were able to get sufficient information. So after we completed this scan, we also loaded this up into Trimble Connect, and that's how this was passed along to our geotech for initial SCARP review to see if we collected sufficient data. We collected about 1 square mile of LiDAR data in about 20 minutes. And then this was handed over to our survey teams, and our survey teams were able to go through and do their normal extraction process and provide that to the geotech for full evaluation for design considerations. So not only did Connect help us get this as an immediate review, but it also helped us transfer this large data set from the vendor to the geotech, to the surveyors, and to construction to be able to review all the information and to work with it as needed.
Hey, Ken, this is Mark House. So I think one of the things that we're finding powerful about Trimble Connect, why don't you tell our audience, our geotech team, how versed are they in using the Trimble ecosystem?
So most of our staff members don't even have a computer that can run most of the Trimble ecosystem. So they don't even have a computer that can run TBC. So if they wanted to load a point cloud and they wanted to operate this, they wouldn't have the technical capabilities or the hardware to be able to do this. So now the Trimble Reality Capture Professional Services, Trimble Connect, is actually democratizing this information to where it doesn't have to be processed down to where they can actually utilize it on the equipment that they have. So this has given us new deliverable prospects on how to get this information out. And it's been multimodal. So we've been able to take these scanners, like in this particular case, what you're seeing now, we took a hover map out and did a scan as essentially a mini MTLS and ran this back and forth to be able to get some basic information to try and keep track on this site. And all of this is loaded through that same workflow of passing it to our survey teams to get information to our designers and continuing through that workflow. Any georeferencing we're doing, our surveyors are coming out and setting the targets for it. And so in this particular case, we blended an aerial LiDAR flight with a ground-based vehicle LiDAR collection to be able to collect information about that. The issue that we had at this location and the partnership that we had with our surveyors is there's very little diversity in this site. So trying to get control out was very difficult because it's all in the redwood forest. So we can't get targets outside of that linear path of the roadway. So trying to find enough control that we can actually work with was difficult. So that was one of the other partnering things that we did. And we used Trimble Connect to kind of help us see the site and try and come up with an aerial target plan that would be useful for surveys when they're requested to come out and do their work, and for construction to be able to continue to do regular movement monitoring. And so
go ahead. Real quick. I think just in case there's any surveyors on the call, let's sort of address the elephant in the room here. Sharing point cloud data with engineers, or even more challenging, the non-engineer sort of profession. That's one of the things that we love about Trimble Connect, because what it does is it beyond even democratizing it, it also provides a comfort level to the geospatial professional at Caltrans, to the surveyor, because once it's in Trimble Connect, it's a great viewer, but it alleviates any sort of concerns that it could get misused. And I think that is a sort of a common concern, Ken, and the surveying professional at least, is, hey, if I share this point cloud data to Ken, we're kind of, or Ken's a different use case, but if we share it to someone else that's not used to this, they might do something they shouldn't with it. The Trimble Connect prevents all of that, doesn't it?
Yes, because we're able to set those access and download controls, and those restriction controls are getting more and more adept as time goes on. With that being said, we have yet another example here of how we've used Connect for like culvert point clouds and stuff that we weren't previously able to collect. That has been a major partnership with our surveyors, as they would go out and set control that we would be able to georeference the scan off of. And since we have the SLAM scanners and the terrestrial quadruped robot that we can send down there and keep people out of it, we're now able to kind of pair those two skill sets together and be able to collect information that we previously weren't able to do. So one of the issues we had with this particular site is the outlet wasn't accessible, but the inlet was. So we were still able to get length information, diameters, like condition of the pipe, all of that from one side, and be able to get that onto plan sets from this emergency situation, all because we were able to work as a team and get that together. So this was able to be produced and handed out to the engineers same day, to where they could get a look at this, pull the diameters of the pipe, look at the condition of the pipe, because this pipe was being considered for a liner. And so that was one of the big things that we've been using Connect for, is to be able to showcase evaluation. So this is exactly how these point clouds are being used, to take basic measurements that you would normally go out there, crawl through it, take a tape measure for. And instead of doing that, we're now able to use Connect to take the person out of the hazardous site, send a robot instead, and then use it in the same conventional method that we would have, which is to take essential measurements that would be a roller wheel, a tape measure, or something else of that nature. And then this can be reused for the design phase for the, at least at Caltrans, for the surveyors to do their extractions and provide those to the designers with their level of scrutiny that we need for reassurance that that's going to be accurate. Same thing here again, is that we were utilized Trimble Connect and robotic inspections to be able to inspect the inside of bridge cells. We had a bridge replacement job that they were having to remove utilities out of because they were changing the type of the bridge and we were no longer allowing natural gas to go through it. And so PG&E did their preemptive work, and they came back and they told the Caltrans staff that like the access was fairly poor in there. And so as part of the design process for removing that utility conduit, we had to determine whether there was sufficient access. So what had happened is the lost deck that was used for forming and pouring that concrete had been stripped in the first two bays and pulled out by the unsheltered and used for firewood. However, when you got to the third and fourth cell, they had stripped the lost deck, but left it just scattered all over the utility. So we were able to determine, without having to enter and get our confined space entry permits and all the atmospheric testing and everything, that we would not be able to quantify this and that we would have to add additional funding to the contingency of that job to be able to cover that extra work. So another one of the use cases here, this was actually the first test case we had for using our Boston Dynamics spot with the hover map to scan an area. We had a major sinkhole develop on US 101, and we were unsure of where the location of the pipe was in relation to a cut slope that you can see on the left-hand side. We were worried about destabilization from the excavation causing additional problems with the stability of the slope. We were also concerned with the depth of the pipe to make sure that we didn't need engineered shoring. And so we were able to scan this and reference it from the work that surveys had done. And we weren't able to get alignment because of a buried dog leg in that. So surveys wasn't able to accurately determine center line above that without entering the pipe. So that's where this pairing came together, and we were able to, one, showcase that using the tunneling module and the issues with the pipe. We were also able to use the utility modules within TBC to model the excavation that was going to be required. And we were able to determine that we had roughly about a foot of spare room between the cut slope, the toe of the slope, and where the excavation was going to be. And then we were able to do our as-built scan as well and reference the two of those together to show the difference between the replaced pipe and the originally failed pipe. So this was one of our first successes on using this system and showcasing that. And we're looking at potentially continuing to use this as part of our asset management, where now we can store these tunneling module analysis of how true and round the culvert is and be able to compare that from year to year. So that way we can come do a subsequent scan and see if there's any new deviation in the pipe. Because one of the things we always run into with any culvert is they're not put in perfectly straight. So when you come back out 5 years later and it's a different person, you're always wondering, well, was that bend always in that pipe? Was that bow always there? Was that how we installed it? And so now being able to store this, share this, and evaluate it with the tools available to us in the Trimble suite, we now have a new way of assessing the health of our culverts.
So Ken, what do you mean by that when you say tunneling module?
So tunneling module is an additional function within Trimble Business Center. So it's not part of the normal suite. So they have the additional tunneling licenses, which is meant for the mining industry, which I believe Albert's going to cover towards the end when he's talking about it. But that adds additional tools that allows you to do analysis on tunnel shapes. The big one that we're looking at with that is we can do a deviation analysis to see how true the culvert was installed. And we can look and see how round and true any cross section along that is.
Beautiful.
So kind of now we're moving on to some of our more regular bid projects here where we're stepping away from the like robotic inspections as much. And so this is where we were using Trimble Connect to kind of bridge our field work and our discussions with the contractors. So this particular job is putting an above grade interchange in with an expanded polystyrene fill, lightweight fill, because of the bay sand, so we couldn't have that much weight. So there was there's roughly 5,000 micropiles in a pile cap that goes underneath the EPS blocks. And so one of the discussions we had to have with the contractor was, how were these blocks laid out? So part of what we did is we went into Trimble Business Center and we used the ANZ toolbox to model all 5,000 EPS blocks and how they interlock together as an example of what we were expecting to see from them. And we shared this view with the contractors so that they could have an idea of what our expectations were. So that way we could continue to have a more productive discussion on what their means and methods was going to be and what the acceptable overlaps and like specialty cuts, and have that discussion there. We were also able to check and evaluate the minimum and coverage requirements and maximum coverage requirements that were called out in the plans, and have a discussion with the designer when we found some discrepancies there. Then once they had started work on the overpass, we were able to do a false work inspection with a robotic platform, same spot hover map system that we were using for our culvert inspections, to be able to do a scan of this without ever having to cross underneath the false work, to kind of keep ourselves out of that. And we used the monuments left by surveys to be able to georeference that to our model, which you'll be able to see here in a little bit. But the benefit of this is we were able to keep staff out of unnecessary inspection where there's some hazards at. While this one had been poured in the use case where we were kind of testing this out, would normally be during a pour, which would be a much more hazardous time frame. And as you can see, when this is something that and I believe this job was with Granite, that they were very grateful to have additional visualization and discussion. So this way, originally in this plan, the only information given for how to lay out the EPS blocks was 2 plan sheets where you had two different cross-section views, and they didn't discuss how overlapping or any of that. So going back to that false work scan, we were able to have that referenced and then load that in against the models that we had created through ANZ Toolbox to be able to look at how well the model was referenced and how well it fit the expected shape and the sizing of that wing wall. And we're able to share this, of course, with our structures reps, our structures inspection, and our structural representatives. And here in just a moment, you'll be able to see that we're able to cut cross sections and look at this. One of the really neat things about Connect is you can actually curate a view for somebody and share that with them so that Connect can jump them straight to what they need to see. So in this case, what I prepared for the staff on site was this cross-section view that showcased just how well we were able to reference that scan and how well it tied in with the expected wing walls that were modeled using the ANZ toolbox. This particular job was not a BIM Variety job where we had 3D models. And in fact, the big use case for Connect on this job was the fact that we were having to remodel the job as we went because there were some critical flaws in the original bid project. And so we had a designer working full-time on this job along with the contractor and myself to be able to get updates out within a couple of weeks as things were identified ahead of time, get those delivered to the contractor via Trimble Connect, and then they would be able to go out, do their analysis, and provide any of their feedback on their means and methods or issues. And we were able to do tweaks and updates to try and keep this project going. If we didn't have that capability and we found these as we ran into these, we would have had at least 3 stop works where we would have had to go back, redesign, and then give the contractor information. Whereas with this new workflow where we're able to visualize and work together and pass information freely back and forth, we had 0 stop works on this job. So another benefit we had with Trimble Connect on this one is we were delivering files to Trimble Access via the connected workflow. And so we were actually able to catch a control bus that was set by the consulted project surveyors compared to the Caltrans control network that was out there. There's roughly a 2/10 bus. Our workflows that work with that and our partnership there with our survey crews is they come out and they will give us site calibrations to work with so that we can do our inspections. And so when that inspector was out on site and he couldn't check in, they ended up putting in a request to our surveyors to come back out and check that. And that's when we were able to find that before we had put in all 5,000 piles with that incorrect data, and then have those 2/10 proud instead of where they were supposed to be.
Yeah, that might have saved you a little bit of money, huh?
Yeah, I think we anticipate between catching the stage construction that didn't fit from the back and forth with the contractor, we saved somewhere around $1.5 to $2 million on this contract.
It's pretty incredible what happens when you bring all the data together, right? And allow more people access to it, and then you can actually work through it together.
Which was, I believe, roughly about 10% of the total cost of the project was saved through adding the digitized workflow and partnering. So one of the other big benefits we got from Trimble Connect is this job had a lot of reality capture, where we did UAS flights back and forth, both the contractor and Caltrans. And so we would share that information back and forth through Trimble Connect and how we were doing our earthwork quantities. So one of the big things we had as a benefit in this project was when we had quantity disputes, we would be coming in to talk about the numbers and how that worked out. So it changed the conversation from this is what I got, this is what you got, to here's what we collected and what does it mean. So in a lot of cases, we might be off by 4,000 yards compared to each other. And the conversation came to, okay, what might this collection have missed? Did you do any remove and replace in between? And a lot of times that was the case, and we were able to close those gaps. So instead of a he said, she said, and only a scribble on paper, we had timestamps and data and information that we could really reverse and figure out the picture. One of the other things that we had that was really helpful with the Connect Access workflow is that since Access can identify any versioning that was set up in a Connect project, and you can see the cloud versions on this, we were able to keep up-to-date files, especially since all of our automated machine guidance, so our surfaces and our alignments, kept getting updated and versioned, that we were able to keep the field staff up to date on what they were inspecting off of. And that was critical for us. Rather than them getting out on site, realizing they didn't have the most up-to-date or there being an issue, all they would have to do is download the updates. And if it wasn't a new file, they'd be notified on their tablet on that they needed to pull those new ones down. And the other thing that was really beneficial for us is that we would set an automated upload. And so when we had our consultant inspectors move on and another one come pick it up, we didn't have to worry about, was that file locked behind their login, or did they take that data with them and now we no longer have access to it? That we were able to pull that information back onto another data collector, or in the case of the designer that was constantly working on this, they were able to get field data in to kind of review how that was working with their design and see if there were any issues there. And then if they found any discrepancies that they would need to take into their design, they would put in a survey request to get the design grade information from our survey crews. And so that's one of the big things that we were able to utilize Access, Connect, and all of that for, is we were able to get preliminary information to be able to investigate whether the next stage of the design was going to have issues and request that additional information. So this particular job site had the MTLS, the mobile terrestrial lidar scanner, come out a couple of times to get updated information because we have subsidence in this area because we're right on a coastal bay. And we had to get new tie-ins because we were finding that what worked a couple of years ago had subsided 2 or 3 tenths, and now we needed to have new models to help work on those tie-ins. And so what you're seeing here is some of the field data that we were pulling in and the information that came from that. So there's a handful of inspections that were done. Right now, we currently separate out our field surveyors' work from our engineers' work, and we're looking forward to being able to kind of aggregate that together and have that security there where we can be confident that all of that information could be there, where if the surveyors maybe miss something, they might be able to go over to the engineer side, pull that information up, do their post-processing on that, and then deliver that information right back to our data collectors for us versus having to do a passover. And I think we're getting close to that, but we're still got to work on Caltrans's end on building that comfort level that is there and building the workflows around that. So, Mark, did you have any comment on the surveys construction, like workflow on support for site calibrations, access, anything of that nature?
No, I mean, it just makes too much sense. I mean, we go through all that effort to have a site calibration created. And from our side, what ends up happening is it might live on a data collector, it might live on a file folder somewhere on a server, and then our construction partners get locked out. Then you run the risk of an engine. In California, that's a protected practice for a land surveyor. That's considered geodesy when you're using site cals with GNSS. And so you kind of run the risk, right? If you've got an RE out there that really wants to get working, but can't find a site cal anywhere, it's, you're kind of tempting the kitty to jump. So what this has done is it's really just centralized, access to that information. And then everybody knows we're all using the same latest and greatest. You're comparing apples to apples. So that's cleaned up a lot of that workflow, I think.
Yeah, you just spread that kick. One of the ways that we've been implementing that is because we're able to set folder level securities. What we've been doing is setting aside a survey folder in our projects that allow the surveyors to have full write control, and then the engineers only have read access. So that kind of puts the control of that site calibration right back into the surveyor's hands, where they can overwrite a version where we know without a doubt that they're running on the proper site calibrations, they're running on the proper control CSVs, because Surveys has full control of that again, versus just handing over a file and not knowing what happens with it after that.
That's right. You have some questions. I can't remember. Are we waiting to the end for questions?
No, if we see something that makes sense, we can go ahead and hit it. Okay.
Yeah. So let's see. Let's go up to the top. This was back in sort of some of the SLAM stuff. Is it possible? I think I know the answer to this one, but I just want to, we'll go to the expert here. Is it possible to open the panoramic images generated by SLAM? I'm guessing that question, Alana, is can you open them in Trimble Connect, right? Not can you open them in Aura?
Yeah, and so right now there's potential for that. I haven't tested the outputs from Aura and E57 to see if that will carry in. I haven't had the opportunity to fully vet that. I do believe there's the potential for that, but I couldn't comment on whether it's fully possible or not.
Next question we got there is, this was back on the culvert stuff. What equipment were you using for the culvert and bridge cells? So it's a 3-part, so that's part 1. What equipment were you using for the culvert and bridge cells?
So the culvert and bridge cells is utilizing the Boston Dynamics Spot as the terrestrial robot to do the robotic inspection, with a Emissit hover map that is doing the reality capture on that robotic platform. And that's the same for the culverts and the bridge cells. So both of those are the same. Depending on the access, we may end up with just the hover map being used if it's too small or too confined space for the robotic platform to work. We've done things like zip line or put it in a cage and do a downhole scan, those sorts of things. So those are kind of dependent on that.
Second part of that question, how does the trajectory work without control inside those areas?
So the SLAM algorithms seem to do a pretty good job of keeping track of it with the IMU and the point cloud processing. That we've had really good luck with that. Occasionally, if there's some stumbling or a roll of the situation, we might have to rescan if we get a SLAM skip. But I've yet to have that issue inside of the culvert so far.
Awesome. Maybe jump back to the video here. We've got a few more questions. We'll save this for later.
Yeah, so this is what you're seeing now is the first BIM for I project we did in District 1. This was an emergency contract slip out, and we had a full model of the structure. We had a full model of the roadway, and we also had our geotechnical bore logs. So we were able to take reality captures regularly throughout the life of the project, utilizing control continuously maintained by surveys. They had to come out every couple of weeks because all of the control was having to be put in the work site. So it was regularly obliterated based on the workflows at hand. And so we can see that we have one stage of the scan when they were working on the first row of tiebacks. And then we've got another scan that was on the third layer, and we can continue to look and we can do volumetrics and stuff off of that. While we wouldn't be able to do those in Connect, we could easily use the connected workflow and pull this information into TBC to do that. One of the other things we had is there was a lot of relocation that happened. So in green is the as designed culvert system. And then we had to move that back due to additional slip out on the inboard side. And so they moved the drainage system in. And so that's the as-built from GNSS collected data that was fed back into this model. So that way we can continue to use it for clash detection and awareness when we were doing any other work. Some of the other things that you're seeing here is we're able to make notes on this three-dimensional space that stays tied there. And we're able to save that view and send that to another staff member. So one of the things that we needed information from our designers and from our maintenance staff was to verify if that existing pipe had been abandoned or if it was still there. One of the things that we had done that was covered a little earlier on there is we evaluated the proximity of our tiebacks to that existing underdrain and found that they were within the deviation tolerance of the drilling of those tiebacks. And so we actually went back to design and adjusted the angles of those tiebacks to make sure that we missed that system. And that was a major cost savings. Additionally, by utilizing Connect, we were able to do clash detection on the solids of the model early on. And they were able to identify that the guardrail was placed over the original alignment of the drainage system because the drainage system was on the RT side of the road. And they actually redesigned that prior to getting to construction because they had identified that conflict. And typically, because of the way that we do our plans, those would be on separate pages that may not be able to be laid over the top of each other because one may not be georeferenced. Typically, our layouts for guardrail are georeferenced. And we wouldn't have seen that co-located over the top of each other. And the drainage system would have been put in first. So we may have had to abandon or removed and replace that drainage system after installation if that had not been caught, which on this project with the clash detections alone, we believe that we had a cost savings of around $1 million in just eliminating rework or potential conflicts. And so the other thing that we used on this project to continue to have discussions with the designers is we did use the BCF topics to save views and kind of send information back and forth. This was really limited initial tests, but it did really help us with getting information out to the designers. One of the issues that we used this on initially was to try and determine the issues we were having with our exports from Civil 3D into the connected workspace. There's some California-specific issues that we run into with the U.S. survey foot, international foot conversions. Now what you're seeing is MPLS data sets. So we've had luck with up to 20 miles being loaded into Trimble Reality Capture Professional Services. And I'll probably end up tripping up, but we have internally affectionately named it as Triceratops. So if you hear that, I'm referring to Trimble Reality Capture Professional Services. And what we were able to do, this one was actually put together and loaded up by our surveyors to provide to our advanced planning so that they could get rough locations of all of the guardrail systems, all of the sign systems, to be able to put in their plans for quantification. And so previously, the only way that they were able to do that work was to drive it, stop, find the nearest culvert marker that had a post mile on it, and walk it with a wheel tape or set the odometer on their truck and drive it. And so now they're able to do this without putting their boots on the ground in a hazardous situation, because in most cases, our shoulders in the District 1 area are 2 foot or less. There's a lot of areas where that information is needed where they couldn't physically get without a lane closure, which when you're doing sites on 20 miles can get really expensive to try and bunny hop that for 5 minutes at a time of just gathering information. One of the other side benefits that we were working on showing them a workflow of is they were also able to pull guardrail heights and be able to assess whether those needed to be replaced or adjusted as part of that contract. And so I don't know, Mark, on your guys' end, but I do believe that trying to gather that information and provide that as a deliverable to advanced planning and those other functional units was just untenable amounts of time. Was that correct?
Yeah, and again, it's coming back to a user base that isn't really equipped to work with point clouds natively on desktop applications. And so giving them access to big data sets like this in a format that they can use intuitively, that doesn't overtax their hardware, that was the win.
Yeah. And segueing from that, what you're seeing here is a recording from an iPhone 12, leveraging earlier data sets that you saw in here. And so I've been able to navigate and utilize point clouds on my iPhone 12, including MTLS data sets, and be able to do quick evaluations and look at that. So it really allows for really any interface, any digital device to be able to interact with these data sets instead of just high-powered desktop machines working with like TBC or other point cloud processing softwares, that you're now able to do this even in the field, do a quick check on like, what was this supposed to be? Because you can do this with the model, with the reality capture, whatever you need, and it's available to you on your cell phone. And so I've had a handful of inspectors that have gone through and utilized this data to be able to do quick field checks. If they didn't have their T100 or their data collector and their rover, they're able to come do quick checks on reality captures. You're able to also have that conversation with the contractor and show what you're looking for, or even with our executive staff. A lot of times I'll get a question when I'm not next to my computer that they want to know something about a project, and I can just pull up Trimble Connect and have that conversation right then and there instead of having to schedule a time and come back and around to that. So I think this is probably another good point for us to pick up a couple more of those questions. I think we got Nick's address, didn't we?
Yeah. So the last one is from Jared. You did get a little bit of kudos from Riley, but then we've got a few questions from Jared. What data size limits does Connect have? That's a loaded question. It depends what you're talking about.
Yeah, so if we're talking about Trimble Connect with the licensing that we have now, we don't have really any file size limits. The limitation is how do you get the file into Connect? So I believe it's like a 2 GB limit for just drag and drop in the web browser. From there, you need to use one of Trimble's other tools like Trimble Sync or Trimble Mirror to get larger file sizes up there. Or in the case of Trimble Reality Capture Professional Services, you would potentially use the publish command in TBC if you didn't have the .lez file up in Connect, where you would convert that over. As far as what we've tested in Trimble Reality Capture Professional Services, we've pushed a 20-mile MTLS data set up there that was I think 2 terabytes. So we've had very good luck on it being able to ingest the information and provide that out. I have not yet tested the full capabilities of what it can do in terms of how do the photospheres and everything display. We've focused just on the immediate deliverables, because even just getting the point clouds to staff that couldn't work with that reality capture data before has been such a workforce multiplier that then the next step hadn't been mandatory at that point. We were just focusing on trying to get some of that preliminary test data out there to help alleviate some of the workflows. Right now in District 1, I believe our survey crews are 6 months behind on trying to keep up with all the requests that are out there, with the amount of work that we have coming through between our like K phase, our early design decision phase, active design, then geotechnical concerns, and our construction concerns. And so in here is kind of showcasing some of the as-builting that we had done on the Bridgeville job. This is on Highway 36. This was our first BIM for I. So as we got close to completing this project, we did more. One of the really interesting things, this one is being recorded on an iPad. And if you have your surfaces, you actually have a walk around tool on those mobile devices where you can actually walk through the project. So if you're trying to showcase with maybe a third party, like one of the permitting agencies, you can actually have your georeference point cloud with your model and actually walk through how it looks, how it's going to look, and give people a little bit more understanding, something a little more tangible than just a couple of plan sheets that you need to be educated on to really be able to grasp. So this was another unique application of being able to showcase how we use that. And even if you don't have the surface for the tool to snap to, you can still aim and navigate through that free space and still kind of walk your way through that. It's not quite as natural as having a surface to snap to, but it was also very effective.
Yeah, and then I'm looking at the point cloud. Those points are kind of big. Is there a way to control the way you visualize your point cloud?
Yes. In this particular case, because I had some sparse data, as this particular collection was a test data set, that I hadn't done a full like cross-hatching to make sure that I had good coverage. It was just to test the new system that I was working with. So, but you do have visualization control over that information. You can determine whether you want to look at it from a RGB standpoint, from your classified standpoint, or intensity standpoint. Those are all options that you have available in Connect to look at your point cloud reality captures. And then, of course, you have all your layer management information, so you can turn on and off. So like on the structural model there, we can turn off the timber lagging, we can turn off the concrete piles. We could be looking at just the I-beams because that was how it was modeled, and all of that power is put in there and is available on whatever device you're connecting to the service. So
Cool.
at this point, that was the end of the presentation that I had prepared. And so I think we've kind of covered questions as we went. Albert, was there anything else you came up with that you'd like us to kind of touch bases on with this?
No, I think that was great, Ken. Thank you so much. I think just on the MTLS data sets, there is definitely a multi-pane viewer that's coming up with Connect, where you can actually view those spherical data sets or the panoramas from the mobile mapping data sets alongside the point clouds and those kind of things. So have a look at that as well. It's a functionality that's being released in Connect. So you can actually do multi-pane viewer to see all your data in multiple windows, and then decide what you want to see in each of those windows, which is a nice add-on onto the Connect platform to give you more access to your data. So no, really appreciate it. Thanks for that. It's been really good and informative. Anything else from you guys' side? Otherwise, I'll just go into the resources and get that over and done with.
I do see that another question had come in from Nick that you mentioned previously about limiting views for different people. And he was asking, how do you organize and manage the permissions? Do you end up getting licenses for everyone that needs to view it? So one of the luxuries that we've had about our implementation of Connect is the only named users that we have are the managers of the project. And then we can add any subsequent person to that project to allow them write, read, whatever access we wanted without having to have a named user license associated with that person. And so the way that we organize and manage that was kind of covered briefly that we glanced over in that video, but you can create different user groups and you can apply people to those user groups. And then you have folder and file level access controls by either username or user groups. And you can really get in there and have a granular security settings in your Connect project. And one of the other things we didn't really address in there is you can also set a template up for that. And you can use that template as part of your creation process, which will allow you to copy over those folders with those preset security groups and security settings.
Yeah, and then Albert, I think Connect is coming out with a way to share views that you don't even need to have a TID, right? Last I checked on the roadmap, that was on the roadmap. So what that means, at some point you'll be able to share views, and people won't have to even log in to their, because you can get a TID for free. That's really what Ken was getting at. You can get a TID for free,
yeah,
and participate for free from a viewer. But I think at some point Connect's going to offer an option where it's literally just a URL. And anybody with the URL can see that view and not actually have to have a TID. So that'll be a great solution as well.
Yeah. I think on that part, obviously, when you want to add projects and create projects in Trimble Connect, that's where the licensing bit comes in. But for somebody that has a free license, you're able to create, I think, 1 or 2 projects and add people to the project. But in the bigger scheme, as long as you have a TID, you can get added to any project on any platform that anybody has. And as Ken said, you can have the granular settings to even go down to a specific file inside a specific folder that's in a folder that's in a folder that's in a folder. And you can just grant access to that one specific file to somebody on there. Or you can even set up groups of people. So you can have your survey crew, and you can have survey crew 1, 2, or 3, and you can actually limit each crew to just have specific access to specific folders and files. So I mean, the possibilities there are endless on how you can allow access to what people see. Can they read, write? Can they only view? Can they do whatever they need to do? And you have full capability there of deciding how you want people to access the data and what access they have to what data sets, depending on the sensitivity of the data as well in that Connect project. So that makes it much easier to manage your data. And as you guys said, to ensure that nobody goes and changes the calibration just for the heck of it, and all of a sudden you find you're now building a nice bridge over the ocean instead of over the river that was supposed to be where it was ended up. So yeah, that's a crucial part in that. And the Connect team is working on enhancing that and making it easier and better going forward with those kind of things.
Yeah, and then Ken said it kind of quickly, but having like a template folder structure. So we have a project folder template that all those permissions and groups are set. So you do it once and then you use it many times. You just add the right people to the right groups. Each project, you still have to do that. But once the folder structure is set and the permissions are set, you just wash, rinse, and repeat at that point.
And if you're lucky enough to have the same group of people on every project, you can import that as well from your template. Whereas on our level, the project staff changes from project to project.
And then Connect will, as we evolve with Connect, you'll see some functionality coming in where once you have a Connect project set up and you have specific design data, you have your FXL files, you have your calibration, your sites, everything that will kind of populate in the Connect project, and then that will start filtering down to anything that you open up in that Connect project. So if you have a Access or SiteWorks or anything like that, as soon as somebody opens up a project or a job in that project, it will just automatically populate with the information down into that controller. So it even gives more control over what coordinate system, what design data do they see. And as Ken mentioned, versioning is done as well. So if somebody opens up a new job file and they want to start working and they don't have the latest version, there will be a pop-up to let you know, listen here, you're not on the latest design, make sure you download this. And rework then gets limited because people don't go off and start working. And by the time they figure out they got the wrong design because somebody only checked it once a week, at least you didn't have a week's work done on the wrong design, and that saves a lot of money and time going forward as well. So those are some of the benefits of being in that Connect environment.
Oh yeah, one more thing, Albert. You're going to want to say this because the title's DOT, right? So I'm assuming there's some DOTs on the call. You might be asking yourself, well, gosh, Mark, we have 4,000 people in our program. And like, congratulations, we've got about 10,000 people in our project delivery program. And so that could be a nightmare, right? Having to walk 10,000 people through creating Trimble IDs. So one thing that's been, I think, a real privilege and a great support from Trimble is they worked with us with our employee registry. So we have single user sign on. And what that means is none of our users have to go create user IDs, Trimble IDs. They just use their state DOT email. And they're basically all the stuff that our people use just to log into their timesheets. It's all the same. And so that was a huge, huge blessing for us because that would be a very tough challenge to work through 10,000 engineers and specifically, right? Engineers and surveyors, right? So I definitely reach out to Trimble to have them work with you on something like that because that was a godsend.
Great. Thanks for that, Mark. Well, thanks, guys. I see we've got a minute or two left, so we'll just quickly run through the resources. Quickly on that, just wanted to touch on any of the stuff that we've discussed. You've got TBC. You can quickly access the YouTube channel where we are sticking all the power hours. So this specific one, if you want to go review it or send it on to somebody that you think might find it useful, this will probably up and about by the end of the week, beginning next week. You can find all of them in the YouTube channel, the geospatial website, construction websites, where you can find all the information retaining to TBC and all the stuff you've seen here today. There's still the 30-day trial license available. So if you want to try out TBC and then see how it fits into Connect, go find it over there. For those of you that want a little bit more information, so not just on TBC, but some of the other stuff, there is the Field Systems Help Portal that relates to all the products in the Field Systems environment we have at the moment. So you can go find Trimble Connect in there and you can see all the links and the help topics and everything pertaining to Trimble Connect. TBC will in there, Trimble Access, SiteWorks, all that equipment and software information is in that fieldSystemsHelpPortal.com. So if you want to get a better overview of everything, please go and view that in that portal for the information that is on there. And then lastly, I was asked to please show everyone that we have the trade-in program going for those that want to move from perpetual licenses onto subscription licenses. We have a big push at the moment, and you'll get a pretty good discount when you want to trade in your perpetual license to move over to the subscription model. Lower upfront cost and predictable pricing for you on a yearly basis. You do get a Trimble Connect Business Premium included with your subscription. So question about what happens if I now want to create more than 2 or 3 projects and I now got to go buy a Trimble Business in a premium license, everything. When you buy your Trimble Business Center subscription, we include the Connect Premium Business subscription in there as well for you. So you already have access to that. As the guys have shown, much easier to share data, make sure everybody has the correct information at the correct time, and always connected, unlock your field to office workflows a little bit easier to make it quicker and more accurate for you to send and receive data from the field and keep your project on track. And as Ken has pointed out a few times, definitely make sure the cost of the project doesn't balloon with a lot of rework and stuff that you need to do over. So have a look at that. If you're interested, you can reach out to your Trimble dealer or the QR code that you see there. I'll leave it up for a little bit if you're interested in looking into that. With that, Mark and Ken, thank you so much. Any last words from you guys side before we end this? We appreciate your time and thanks for the presentation.
Thank you.
Good. Then if you have any questions, I can always pass that on to them. So there is my email address. So if you guys have anything specific that you think of or when you review the video that you want to ask to Ken and Mark, you can always reach out to me and I can pass it along to them. Thank you so much for your time, guys. Appreciate your time on this as well. And hope to see everybody back for the next Power Hour in the end of May. Have a good afternoon, evening, or rest of your morning for you guys over there. That's a very early start for you. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. And we will catch you at the next Power Hour.